When you put someone who's very curious in a tough environment where they have to use whatever they have in order to get out of that environment, that creates a drive to transition from a tough situation to a better situation. What makes a person the best person to run a certain system is their willingness to stick with it for a long period of time. And I know there are always people better than me at anything. If I can package the task or the job or the role and hand it to someone else, that's my goal, that's my dream.
Strengthen the love, the legacy, and the lifestyle in your family business. This is Fearless Family Business. We've all heard powerful stories of rags to riches, but what if the secret to achieving that was rooted in curiosity? My guest today, Jay Bourgana, followed his curiosity through a remarkable journey from an impoverished childhood in Morocco to building a $350 million real estate empire from scratch. But it wasn't the size of the exit that stood out most about Jay's story. It was the idea that we can systemize the most important parts of our businesses and our lives, not just to give us greater freedom, but more importantly, to build our resilience in a world of abundance and fragility. As family business leaders, we crave resilience. But what does real resilience actually look like? Jay's story and insights reveal the answer in this episode. So buckle up, because this conversation dives deep into resilience, financial freedom, and the real work of building legacy on your own terms. So if you're a leader in a family business and you're mired in chaos, I think this one will resonate. And hey, if you get any value from these fearless conversations about family, business, and legacy, please don't forget to subscribe. We are just getting started. Enjoy the episode. Jay, welcome to the show. I'm so glad you're here today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, man. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. It's kind of following up on the conversation we had. It's almost part two. And if you want to listen to part one, Jay interviewed me on his podcast, The Acquisition Collective, and we'll get into that a little bit more. But I want to kind of touch on your history, because you have such a unique and broad history, where you came from, how you've built businesses. Can you tell us a little bit about, how you grew up, how your family life was, and yeah, maybe start off there.
Yeah. So I'm originally from Morocco. I grew up there. My parents were pretty poor, and they were not a really good fit to be together. So they were divorced, when I was 2. They came back together later on, and then they divorced again. And so I grew up in an environment or in a situation where there's a lot of financial uncertainty, and that kind of drove my curiosity around financial freedom, wealth building, and understanding business and understanding money in general. Mm-hmm. And since I was very little, I would ask people around what they did, how much, what their income was, and how much they spent on things. And I've developed a pattern recognition to kind of find out who actually knew what their finances were and who didn't. And as I grew a little bit older and I started working, the first place that I thought of working was the bank, because I figured the money's in the bank. Might as well go learn about money at the bank. And I got to see, develop that pattern recognition even further, and understood kind of like where value is created by whom. And I was excited about entrepreneurship. I met all the entrepreneurs in our bank, and those were my favorite people. Mm-hmm. And so that kind of drove me after spending about 5-6 years in banking, in Morocco and Europe, as well as here in the US. I ended up shifting from that into a more entrepreneurial endeavor. So I went into manufacturing. I spent a couple of years in the US, and then about 5 years in China. And I kind of saw how a fast growing economy, especially now with the whole conversation with tariff right now, it's very fascinating, because I was there early, 2000, mm-hmm. like early 2000s. So when the growth of China and the transfer of all the manufacturing was going from the US to China, I was there. I saw it. And then, so I learned a lot, and I grew through, the career path, and I became, a C-suite, within the organization until 2007, 2008 crash happened. And, essentially everything, went sideways. And I understood very clearly that no matter how you go up in the totem pole, if you will, you really don't have control over the situation. So, so that created an interesting dynamic for me because I've always been someone who looked at how to create a resilient life, a resilient system. And I felt that as much control as I had, I didn't have any. And so I spent about another 5 years after that doing consulting, advising on turnaround. Post 2008, everything became a turnaround, whether it is manufacturing, distribution, all kinds of industries in multiple countries, and which I enjoyed a lot because you're coming in to essentially save the day, if you will. And a lot of times you're prescribing things that are obvious, but they're not obvious to the people in there. And I got tired of travel. And I mean, by then I was living in a hotel for about 10 years. So I decided I'd go back and get an address and a mailbox. and so I decided, to move back, and around the same time met my wife, and, got interested in real estate. And I built, and real estate was starting to get hot, early, around 2011, 2012.
Right.
And so I built a real estate company from 0 to 350 million in sales within about 4 years. And, we were acquired the following year. I moved in, I went from being a CEO to being a VP within the company again. And I saw how that goes within a large company. I did a little bit of transformation within that entity for a couple of years until COVID happened. And then, everything stopped again. And so, the situation was a little bit better during that time. So I essentially moved to Hawaii and retired for about 4 years until I got tired of retirement, and I came back to the mainland again.
And now you're starting again. It's a fascinating story from your start of being, growing up in a poor family with divorced parents, and then, basically following your curiosity, which drove you to building a $350 million real estate company. And did you just say you built that in 4 years from scratch?
Yeah.
Wow, that's incredible. And you ended up selling that company?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so we were lucky in a way, but we caught the trend of the online marketing within that space. And it was still new. And the startups at the time were the Zillows and the Redfins and the Realtor.com. And so we kind of took that ride of fast growth with them. Yeah. So our acquisition cost and everything was low when they started. By the time I exited, they were 10 times what they were when it started.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, if I always think that luck has something to do with success, but also it's your ability to identify the opportunities where luck is most likely to occur and then capitalize on it. And to build a company from 0 to 350 in just a few years is incredible. And then have a successful exit on top of that. And when you sold it, you said you moved from CEO to VP. So you stayed in the company and stayed in the leadership.
Yes. Yeah. And we did, mostly M&A post,
Gotcha.
So we did about 22 transactions within 18 months.
Okay. Gotcha. And that kind of gets you into the world of where acquisitions come into play.
Yes.
So that's really fascinating. I want to kind of dig into a little bit, going back a little bit.
Yeah.
To your younger days when you were in Morocco and just feeling curious about that. Because there's two ways I see, kids getting shaped in nowadays. And I want to know if this is DNA or if this is, or what your thoughts are on this, because some kids grow up maybe impoverished, maybe not growing up with successful parents, and they kind of live into that and they kind of reinforce that in the next generation. But there's others like yourself that have this curiosity or want to figure something out, and they have a drive and they go after it. What do you think the difference is there? What was it in you that made you feel like that curiosity was important?
Yeah, I think, and I agree with you. I think there's a combination of nurture and nature. I think, when you have the DNA or the seed of curiosity and you have that built in, I think you're going to do okay in any environment.
Right.
And so I was just I was born a super curious person. You could put me in the library and I'll be reading about, black holes and about economics, reading economics books and Isaac Asimov fiction books and politics. And I'll read 3 newspapers. At the time, right. I knew the French, the British and the American politics. And I think it's just a nature thing. Mm-hmm. And I think when you put someone who's very curious in a tough environment where they have to use whatever they have in order to get out of that environment. So that creates essentially a drive to transform or to transition from a tough situation to a better situation. Then you lean on that curiosity and you lean on that ability to absorb a lot of information, and you lean on that ability to recall and develop a pattern recognition. And I think that's, I think there is a big element of nature there, but definitely the environment pushes you to use that curiosity towards something that's going to, help you transform or evolve into the next stage, because the environment is making it tough for you to stay where you are. You got to go somewhere else. You got to transition into this other stage. So I think you lean on whatever tools you have. Some people maybe are more charismatic and they can talk their way through things, so they'll lean on that skill. Some people are better looking and they're attractive and they use that as a tool to transition. And some people are just curious and collect information and they use that to transition to the next stage.
Yeah, I love that. That's how, and how are you using that for the nurture side? Because now you're a parent, you're father. How do you use that for your kids to maybe reinforce that in them?
Yeah, we talk a lot. I'm always learning. So what I do is I take them on that exploration ride with me. And so we have these conversations on a daily basis. We spend a couple of hours every morning. The kids are homeschooled. So every morning, 7 to 9, they sit with me and we talk about everything. And it could be, tariffs today, or it could be, how to pick a good franchise to buy, or it could be about how to make friends and influence people. So every day is a different theme. And I observe, maybe with them, I observe who is interested in what, and I just follow their own curiosity. So, my daughter is much more verbal, much more, has a better recall, has much more assertive in her communication. My son is more tactile. He likes to touch things, move things. So with him, we'll talk about, robots, and we'll talk about GPUs, and we'll talk about, things that he can kind of touch and physically kind of tinker with, or just get an understanding to wrap his head around. My daughter will talk about leadership and philosophy and this, and they're both at the same time, but I try to kind of spread it between the two based on their strengths and based on what I think their superpowers are. Yeah,
I love that. It's like you're meeting them where they're at, and also kind of trying to teach them or guide them as well. I love that approach, that kind of dual-edged approach. Touching on the tariffs, because you mentioned that, and coming from your background of having worked in China, worked overseas, what's your take on that as far as where we're at now? And in the space, you said it's kind of interesting and seeing it from your perspective on where you're at. I'd just love for you to expand on that a little bit.
Yeah. And I used to think of myself as someone who's a free trade person. And again, I spent the early 2000s moving factories to China. I've spent a lot of time in China. I've seen the early factories being built from nothing. I've seen how the Chinese government used the banking system to pump a lot of cash into these facilities, even though they were not making money. But, the goal was to hire as many people as possible. The Chinese government used to force my company to hire more people just because they needed to hire more people. And so when I went in, I would find a production line that should have 10 people with 30 people. Right. And you know how messy that could be. So they, China had an intentional strategy for the last 25, 30, 40 years in, hiring people, lifting their people out of poverty. So, which makes sense for them. They borrowed a lot of money. They printed a lot of money to facilitate, that transfer of manufacturing capacity from the US and from all over the world into China. And that, low quality products that they were making evolved over time. And they built a large capacity around that. They built large ports. They built, supply chains. They built, plastic manufacturing, all kinds of like infrastructure around the cheap stuff. And they evolved into more expensive stuff and more, technical stuff. And then they kept evolving over time. And we went the other way. The United States went the other way, where they kept losing the low end stuff. And then now they're losing the high end stuff. And I think that's the part that's missed in the conversation. Is the fact that people will say something about, well, we don't want to make T-shirts or we don't want to make dolls, but it's all related. It's all connected. You go from the T-shirt to the doll to the iPhone to the drones, and so after 20 some years observing the pattern. I see the benefit in trying to change that, trying to make the free trade more fair trade, and trying to put pressure or change the rules or the incentives in the market to have more manufacturing here in the US, to force the companies here to create some education program, some apprenticeship program like Germans and everybody else does, to get more people into manufacturing, to increase our capacity. Yes, we're not going to get we're going to have more automation than China. We're going to have more stuff, but all those are good jobs, technical jobs. And if they're here, we're going to have a lot of infrastructure around that. And we're going to be able to be not necessarily a productive nation, not just a consumer nation, but also we're going to be less fragile. We're less exposed, in case of crisis. We saw what happened during COVID, where we saw how the supply chain stopped and how we were reliant on other countries for medicine and steel and all the healthcare consumables. So I think again, it's messy right now and it feels chaotic, but I think it is the right thing to have this conversation. And we probably may not fix it all in this attempt, but there will be more attempts to try, but at least we're having this conversation.
Yeah. Anytime you can have an open conversation about something, good or bad, it's at least we're talking about it. And, certainly it's the topic of conversation in every industry, that we're in, especially family business, where we are very people oriented, very, very human oriented. So we have both sides there. And I'd love to know, like, from your perspective on kind of moving into the acquisition side of acquiring business, I want to approach this question from two different contexts and from two different perspectives, really. From the standpoint of a family business, maybe that's looking to be acquired, given your experience, what should they be doing or setting up, or how would you approach looking at a business like that, like a family business that is multi-generational, that may want to take some money off the table, maybe wants to sell it completely, maybe the family's not interested? What should they be doing between 5 and 3 years from when they're going to start that process?
Yeah. And whenever someone is acquiring a business, they're acquiring the earnings of that business. And so they're, inherent in those earnings, there's risk. So, if you go meta on this conversation is like, the project would be over 2 to 3 years is to eliminate risk from these earnings. Mm-hmm. So anything that you can do to make these earnings predictable are going to be beneficial. So the way you acquire customers and you retain them, if you have a predictable way, a consistent way of acquiring customers, mm-hmm. and then you have a system to retain them for a long time, that takes away the risk from the client side. Sure. If you have a predictable way to and a consistent way to acquire talent within your company and to retain that talent through a strong culture, that takes away the risk of the team. Mm-hmm. If you have systems and processes that are predictable, that are on paper, that everybody knows, that people are SOPs that people understand, that takes the risk away from the systems. If you have clean data and it's we know where the data is and we know how it flows through the company and it's predictable and it's, visible to everybody, then we take away the risk from the data. If we have consistency in our profitability, within our operation and within our finance, if we have consistency over time, that we know our margin, we deliver that margin pretty consistently. We know what the levers of that margin, and we have processes around to be consistent, mm-hmm. keep that margin consistent, then we take a risk from our finance side. So for me, there are not that many systems in the business. There's the client acquisition and retention, talent acquisition and retention, capital acquisition and retention. And then if we have those systems built out in a way that is predictable, consistent, de-risked, then that creates a lot of value in that business.
Sure.
And it's a lot easier to transfer or transition that business to another acquirer, and that business becomes very attractive, to mm-hmm. most acquirers.
Yeah. How do you see the risk of just the fact that it's a family-owned entity? I mean, because that seems to me that's part of the risk. If it's a family, if the family is a big part of that intrinsic value within the company, and it's no longer part of that company beyond the sale, then, how are you mitigating that risk, or how should companies be mitigating that risk?
Yeah. So the question is, who's going to stay, who's going to go, and obviously, and then how the people who are leaving, where are they doing, and who can do the job, who can take on that role, within the team, who's capable within the team to take on that role. And at the end, people within the company, whether it is the family or even, employees, we talked about taking the risk off the people side. So what is the concentration? What kind of value individuals generate within the company? And then do we have concentration within a specific individual? If a family member, one of the challenges with family businesses is a lot of times, the owners take on a lot of roles, they take on a lot of responsibility. They don't give, the responsibility to others. And so they don't have someone who can replace them. And so if they take the time to train, teach, find a replacement, and mentor someone who's going to take on that role, where they can go on vacation for a month and never have to pick up the phone or never have to get any calls, that's a great sign that the business can, not only run, but can grow without them. And that's a sign of a healthy business, a business that's very valuable, that can get an extra turn or two of EBITDA in their valuation.
Yeah, I feel like that's a trap that a lot of family businesses fall into, is they don't do that because they want to remain a family entity. So they almost shy away from this idea that, hey, we should actually build the value that if we did sell, it would still, that value is transferable.
Yes.
And that's a problem, I think, and that's why I'm kind of glad you're here to shed some light on that.
Well, so a lot of it sometimes is just it's almost like something that you have to solve with your therapist around, your identity. And then a lot of times they just put the role becomes part of their identity, and they attach to it so much that it's very hard to let go, and they feel threatened when someone is encroaching on their tasks, which become part of who they are. And I think, I've learned that a long time ago that, most of the successful people tend to, kind of like fire themselves as quickly as possible. From anything they do, so same thing for me. As soon as I take on any task or a job, whatever, my goal is to, design it in a way where I can package it in a way where I can fire myself as quickly as possible and find someone who's better than me. And I know there are always people better than me at the thing, at anything, and, so if I can package the task or the job or the role and hand it to someone else, that's my goal. That's my dream.
That's a great insight too. And it kind of brings me to another question I wanted to ask you too, because building and buying all these businesses, it takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of time. And when you think of the hustle culture that we have lived in historically, it's all about working the 20-hour days. But I don't get the impression that you're falling into that category of working 20-hour days. It seems to me that you want to live a lifestyle that is fun and you spend time with your family. So is that really the secret? Is you're just building the roles so that you don't have to work those roles as quickly as possible?
100%. So I kind of like do the same thing, the sprints, and I don't equate myself to Elon Musk, but Elon Musk does this really well. He's the best at it in the world. And if you study him and if you observe him, he would go into an industry and he'll do like a sprint, like a 3-month, 6-month sprint, and he'll live that business. He'll do like 20-hour days if he had to. He'll sleep in the factory, but he wants to see what drives the business. What are the levers that drive the business? He needs to conceptually see the whole thing end to end. What are the bottlenecks? What are we doing here? What's the goal? And then he goes through the framework of, eliminate, automate, and delegate. So he starts with eliminate, so the first thing, the quick question, do we need to do this? Not necessarily how to do this or who should be doing this. No, it's do we need to do it, from a first principle. And then does it help us achieve the goal? So eliminate, automate, delegate. And then once he does that, then he moves on. It may take 3 months. It may take 6 months. It may take a year, but there is a period of time where you get it. It clicks. You understand what the process should be, what the outcome should be, and who are the people that need to fit within that process. And then you just hand it to people that are, again, better than you at it, that are going to be committed to it moving forward. And then you just back off and you just watch maybe 1 or 2 KPIs and that's it. Yeah.
Do you think that's built into your genetics? Like just the idea of that? Because you do run into a lot of CEO types that are just, they got caught in that trap almost like a drug, like it's an addiction and they just want to keep working. I know that I fall into it too, but what do you think about that?
I agree. I think, I'm not sure if it might be part genetic, part, PTSD or trauma, childhood trauma, where you always want to have freedom of your own time or maybe control. I have this, as a child, when you're in a very traumatic situation growing up, you have this desire for control. And then part of control is controlling your time, controlling your, and so whenever you feel stuck in something where you have to show up to something every time or all the time and you feel trapped and you want to get out of it. So the best way I found is to build systems and to identify, I learned the skill of building these systems and identify the best people to run them. And then automatically I always think of myself, I'm the least qualified person to run this thing. I should give it to somebody else. Because I think also part of what makes a person the best person to run a certain system is their willingness to stick with it for a long period of time. And I just don't have that in me to be doing the same thing some people find that calming and soothing to do that all the time. My personality, I have to do new things every few months or every few years. So I think, you don't necessarily have to have that as part of your identity. You don't have to have childhood trauma to do that, but you can, imitate that. You can emulate that. You can, come from that perspective that, my job as CEO is to build these systems, find the right people to run them, and then give them the autonomy, give them the alignment, create alignment for them, give them the environment to thrive and run and go build something else.
Yeah. If you're a family business owner or operator and you're looking to get more control over your business, I would love to talk with you. I want to give you a special invite to request a free 90-minute workshop with me to learn the powerful tools of EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. Just shoot me an email at adam.hill@eosworldwide.com. Again, that email is adam.hill@eosworldwide.com. I'll put that in the show notes as well, and I look forward to talking to you soon. Well, let's touch on systems for a second too, because you mentioned the idea of eliminating, automating, delegating, and using that as something of a system for pulling yourself out. Client acquisition, capital acquisition, talent acquisition, or types of systems. How do people? I guess I'd love to hear you expand on what kinds of systems and how to maybe implement those systems in the business to make sure you're actually following through on that.
Yeah. So in any system, whether, talent or capital or clients, I always quote Stephen Covey, begin with the end in mind.
Yeah.
And, so what is the end? What is the goal? And a lot of times people can't really articulate that, so for example, in terms of customers, you try to acquire customers. Okay. Can you identify what that goal is? And I was like, well, I just want customers. Well, do you want any customer or you want specific kind of customers? What is your ideal client profile? Yeah. And so that process, is something that, I assume that every CEO has gone through and he's going through it continuously because that ICP or ideal client profile changes over time. Right. And so it's a big important thing, and that needs to be communicated through the whole company. So once we identify who that ideal client profile, ideal talent profile, then we go and figure out where they are, and we build, different funnels for different channels, and then we communicate a certain message to attract these people, to get their attention and to set an appointment and to do a consultation and to close. So it's the same thing with talent. What is your ideal client, ideal talent profile for the role? How do we, what message, what message do we deliver to them to bring them? So for the specific, there's a specific personality or a specific profile. The way I'm going to know the message, I'm going to ask my best people. If I have some great people on my team, I want to attract people like them. I'm going to ask them, hey, what do you love about being here? What made you stay here? What, and then I'm going to, communicate that to the prospective people. And if it's a match, if they're truly like these people, then they're going to click with that message. And then I just need to keep, delivering that message over and over and keep communicating. And if we are serious about, talents, and we're serious about our end goal, then we're not going to give up on the first or second or third attempt at failing at it. We're going to keep going because we know what the end goal is. We don't have a new end goal because we failed. No, we keep staying with the end goal. It's funny because we just had the NFL draft, and they talked to one of the coaches / scouts, and he was talking about how the success rate of picking good players in the first round is essentially just like a crapshoot. It's just like luck. There's really no formula. There's no, there are no people within the NFL that have like a very high, rate. It's comparable to just grabbing the name of a basket of names. Right. And you listen to the VC guys and they'll tell you the same thing. They'll tell you, picking a business that's going to be a unicorn is a crapshoot too. It's just like, just random luck. You invest in 500 of them and, 2 of them end up being unicorns. So when you think about it, even the people that we call are the best at it, all they do is they have more attempts.
Yeah.
They just make more, just take more
they
shots.
Take action. Yeah.
Yes. You know what I mean? They just make more shots. And so if you're going to, do acquisition, whether clients or talent, or on the finance side, you need a line of credit, or you need, investors, or you need whatever. You just got to talk to more people, talk to more potential customers, more potential employees, more potential banks, and until you find your ideal prospect. And and I think that's kind of like one of the elements where you build systems around that. So if we're, when I talk to companies, a lot of times they tell me that their bottleneck is finding talent, right?
Right.
Well, and I ask them and I say, okay, so if I give you 1,000 clients and 1,000, technicians or talented individuals, which one would you want? They'll say, oh, I'll take the people. I say, great. Then I'll look at, and I ask them, how many salespeople do you have? I was like, oh, we have 5 salespeople. Well, how many recruiters do we have? We don't have any. Well,
right. Disconnect there.
You just told me that your bottleneck is recruiting, and yet you have no recruiters.
Right.
You're not investing any attention or capital or marketing on that side. And so that's kind of like where, to me, companies have to have these systems or machines running all the time. You have to have the client acquisition and retention system going all the time. The talent acquisition and retention system going all the time. The capital acquisition and retention going all the time. These are systems that have to be running 24/7, not when we need them. They need to be running all the time.
Right. It sounds to me like it's almost like you're identifying the place where you're constantly putting out fires as an executive, and you're basically systemizing the process of stopping that, of stopping your activity in that, and freeing up your time to actually look at the vision of the organization to make sure that you're heading in the right direction. And that's all system work is.
That's it. And just make sure that everybody is aligned. Everybody's going toward the same end goal. And I mean, I think a lot of times you go into companies and you ask people, what are we doing here? And they have no idea.
Right.
What's the goal? What do we do here?
Right.
And you might get 20 different answers.
Yeah. And again, it's something that family businesses struggle with too, because they're so intent on, especially maybe in the right people, right seats arena, because they're hiring family members, and they might be just putting family members in seats because they want to keep those family members employed without looking for where the right seats are. So delegation becomes a real issue.
Yes.
Now all of that effort falls on the CEO or the person in charge because the people below them aren't being trusted to do their jobs.
Yes. And I mean, what you want, like, again, just like any team, you hire the best talent in each role. Right. And then you align everybody on what the goal is. If people don't know where do we score points or how do we score points, how are they going to do it? They're going to be like, stepping on each other's feet and taking the ball the wrong direction. And so you got to have all the best people and have them align on what the goal is, what the plan is, what is the strategies. A lot of time, we don't have to complicate things. Yeah. It's very simple. You just have to communicate. And most people, majority of people, they only want 3 things. They want ability to grow, to learn and grow, so growth or mastery, if you will. They want to be able to have the autonomy of what they do in the day to day. They don't want anybody like standing over them all the time. You could do it for a period in the beginning, but you can't do it all the time. And they want purpose. They want what they do to mean something. To actually have an impact.
Right. Yeah. Meaning is so important. Yeah, it absolutely is. And we have to maintain that meaning in business, especially in the generations. And I think that's why this conversation is so important, because a lot of times for family businesses in multiple generations, that meaning gets lost.
Yeah.
It just becomes a founder vision that we're just keeping going because the founder started it. And we can't stop it now. It almost means that we're trying to keep something alive for the sake of keeping it alive.
Yeah.
But if that meaning isn't there in that business anymore for that entity or for that family, the best thing to do is to set it up and sell it to help make sure and maybe acquire something else, set the family up, but help the kids to acquire something, which is the work that you do. And that's,
and I almost think that from our, kind of remind me of the conversation we had last time. I almost think like that process of communicating meaning and communicating purpose, and almost that process, that's a system on its own that needs to be built to transition businesses where, like we were talking about your grandfather, if you could go back and have a conversation with him, how would you extract, download what the meaning, and how can you see it over, 2 or 3 or 4 generations? I almost think that that's a system on its own. How can you build a system that transition meaning from that first founder to the next and next and next generation?
Yeah. That's such a great point. I love that idea of creating a system around communicating the meaning. That would be a valuable ideal there. I love that. I love to kind of shift into kind of speaking of that meaning, the meaning of parenthood. Yeah. That's something that you're passionate about. You have this project in addition to the Acquisition Collective, which is where you are. You are sharing these stories of acquisition and building on that. But Raising Lions is something that you're passionate about with fatherhood. Can you talk a little bit about that and share what you're doing there?
Yeah. So Raising Lions came about from my conversations with lots of entrepreneurs, a lot of CEOs that I meet, and all these events and masterminds that we're in. And I've always, people will always ask me questions around where my kids go to school, what they do. And I always, when I tell them that they're homeschool, and they go into the whole socialization question. And then we find ourselves talking about kids for 2 hours. And I found that a lot of people, a lot of parents, a lot of fathers are, concerned about all the social changes, the cultural changes, the impact of technology on society today and the future. And they're kind of lost. They don't know what to do. And sometimes there's a disconnect between the dad and the mom, and then they don't know how to articulate their vision or what they want to do. So we created a community where we share, essentially, fathers share their insights. They share what's working for them, what's not working. They ask for help. And, and for me, it was, it's like I felt that there's such a big gap between, the way I grew up and the way my kids grew up. And the world has completely changed in the last, 40 some years. There's just more abundance. And because there's more abundance, that comes with fragility and less resilience. And so my fear for my own kids and made me think of these things. How can I insert ways to develop resilience in my kids, to develop self-awareness, whether it is, mental, physical, environmental, career, financial, all the aspects of resilience, because we're living in a world that's, ever changing. It's changing even faster than it did, when we grew up. And that conversation resonated with a lot of fathers. And that's kind of how Raising Lions started.
Yeah. Well, it's a great, it's a great kind of thesis around the idea that with abundance, which sounds like a great thing, we all want abundance, right? Yes. But with this idea of abundance and infinite choice comes a lot of fragility. Yeah. That's such a powerful statement. As I know, within our kids now, mental health issues are just exploding. And it's a really, really tough time to be growing up. And so your idea is kind of bringing more resilience to our kids through how we parent. That's right.
100%. Yes. So it's essentially kind of like what we talked about earlier is, beginning with the end in mind. I think most fathers do not wake up in the morning thinking, how do I develop resilience in my kids today?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They're not thinking about that. It's like, maybe they're thinking about education. Maybe they're thinking about health. Maybe, how can we get the, color red 40 out of their food? Or maybe how do I, teach them how to code maybe, or maybe, how to use ChatGPT, but they're not really thinking about, resilience, whether it is, how to build systems for resilience. So as an example, we talked about French kids, and friends. And, my kids, we moved and my kids lost all their friends. And I'm like, okay, so, they were sad. And I was like, okay, what do you want? Well, I want friends. What kind of friends? Well, I don't know. Do you want good friends, bad friends? Do you want smart friends or not so smart? Do you want active or inactive? You want kids who read or want to play video games? You have to have an ideal friend profile, end game. And then once you have that, you have this vision of what that ideal friend profile look like. Then you build a system to acquire that friend, and we build a system to retain that friend. Right. Just like we talked about earlier. What is our system to acquire a friend? We go out and we ask questions. We introduce ourselves. Number one, by me being able to go out to a stranger, say, hi, my name is Jack. I'm 6-year-old. How old are you? I like to do jujitsu. What do you like to do? I like to watch Garfield. What do you like to watch? I live in this neighborhood. Where do you live? I'm in this grade. What grades are you in? Just that basic questions, the kid can tell, the kid's going to develop pattern recognition of who's looking them in the eye, smiling, answering the question, and then who doesn't even know his name. And if you know that person, then what's the next thing? Well, we need to capture the information. Well, there's a parent nearby. Hi, ma'am. My name is Jack. I'd like to invite Joey over here to a pizza party. What's a good phone number? Capture that information. Know that, you know what I mean? So that's a system to acquire a friend. Now you want to keep that friend. What do you need to do? You have to, have a CRM, if you will, like a little spreadsheet, what's their birthday? What is their favorite color? What's their favorite show? What is their favorite thing? Make sure you invite them to a pizza party once a month. Make sure that, you check in on them. Make sure you invite them to a play date, whatever. And that consistent contact and adding value. How can I add value to that person's life? How can I, tell them about this book that I just read, or tell them about this technology tool that I just learned, or whatever. You're adding value to that person's life. That person's going to be more, attracted to you. So you have retention there. And, and so these basic systems to create resilience. Now, if the kid can acquire friends on their own anywhere they go, that's a very big tool in their toolkit to be able to find community, to find love and connection, if you will. And they're never going to be, if you drop them in Japan tomorrow in the mountains, they're going to figure out a way to make friends and build community. Yes. You know what I mean? Yes. That's resilience. Right. If they don't have that skill, they won't. And they're going to be depressed, and they're going to be sad, and they're going to be unhappy, and they're not going to be their best selves.
Right. Wow. So the wheels are spinning, and it's interesting how you're applying the same, the same techniques within building a business and being able to scale and give yourself that freedom to the idea of raising kids and not creating the systems for them, but helping them to create their own systems to live in this abundant world and bring more resilience to the fragility, so to speak.
100%.
I love that. That's 100%. So great.
Yeah. And then when you think about the connection between that and abundance. So there's so much abundance in the world. Now kids have access to, they'll buy the latest phone, they'll buy the latest, game, the latest technology. They can go acquire anything. They buy the most expensive clothes. They're driving expensive car. Like, it's insane. The stuff that's happening in middle school and in high school today. And now, kids, if they're not equipped with the tool to understand what is my ideal friend profile, or my ideal, wolf pack, if you will, what do I want to design? How do I design my wolf pack? Then they're going to be like, oh, in order for me to belong, in order for me to be inside of a tribe, I have to do what the tribes does, monkey see, monkey do. And so now I have to go and acquire these silly things, or maybe dress a certain way, or maybe put makeup a certain way, or do certain things. And I'm forced, and every time that group moves further this way, now they're partying, they're drinking a little bit, or they're using some drugs, or they're, sexting or sending each other some stuff. Now I have to participate in all these things that are part of the ritual of this little tribe. And I'm trapped because I don't know how to build my own thing.
Right.
But when you have the toolkit to do your own thing, you don't have to do that. You can just say, no, I'm okay. I don't want to play that game. I'm going to play my own game over here and do my own thing over here with the people that I like. So that creates that, this abundance creates this issue over here. And then that lack of ability to build community and make friends creates that fragility where I have to do the same thing as everybody else. I have to follow the herd in order for me to feel that I belong. And, humans naturally need to feel that, but it can be either proactive or reactive, and that's kind of like the, one of the challenges. Or for example, we talk about, doing jujitsu, or, jujitsu is a system. Mm-hmm. So maybe I don't have to teach it to them. I'll make sure that they're in learning the system. I'll make sure that they're staying in it. They're not giving up or quitting. And then so they can build skills to defend themselves. So if someone comes at them or whatever, they can stand up for themselves. I don't have to be there to protect them, but we take away that fragility. We take away that risk of them. And then also it gives them confidence in themselves. It gives them abilities. It gives them a sense of self-sufficiency, autonomy that can, build on other things.
Yeah. That's incredible. That's really great. I really love that idea of systemizing that idea, and Raising Lions seems like it's just a great platform to help other parents do that. Yeah. I want to finish off with one last question, kind of going back to the acquisition front and talking about that, because you've built businesses from scratch, you've acquired businesses and everything like that. I know there's not a one size fits all for everyone on this, whether they should build or buy. Yeah. But in making that consideration, whether it's somebody wanting to buy their first business or build their first business, or a multi-generational family business that's looking to bolt on or build a new platform, what do you think are the top 2 or 3 things that they should be thinking of when making that decision to build or buy?
Build versus buy?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, obviously we know that when you start a business, there's a high risk of failure, so every year there's a 95% chance you're going to fail. And so for at least about 3 years. Right. So when you acquire a business, you essentially sidestep that experience, because now you're acquiring something that has proven unit economics, where how much the services has been sold for the past, maybe 10, 20, 30 years. Maybe you're buying a business that's 40-year-old. That business has been around for that long. So they know how much they sell product or service, how much their margin is. So that's proven. The market already said, we want this business to exist, and we want to be customers of this business. And then when you buy the business, it comes with customers on the one side, it comes with employees on the other. That's, been proven, that's been consistent, that's retaining. So you don't have to start, seeking these customers, churning. So this, it's going to save you the effort and the time and the money for, that period to build that business. It took 40 years for that entrepreneur to get to that size. Maybe you're smarter and you're better and it will take you 10 years, but it's still 10 years that you can sidestep in one transaction. So that's one big benefit. The other benefit is the ability to use leverage. It's a very unique thing in the United States. It doesn't exist. The lending system that we have in the United States doesn't exist anywhere in the world. Mm-hmm. And it's because we have the dollar as a reserve currency, and we have the ability to, the government has the ability to guarantee loans for the SBA, and the banking system is a very mature banking system, financial system. So we have the ability to acquire these businesses with very little money up front, with a lot of leverage, which is incredible gift, again, that doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. If you had told someone in France or in Sweden that you could do that, they would never start a business. They would always be buying businesses. But it's incredible, the level of leverage that you can do. Now, I even talk to friends who are considering, for example, franchises. And I asked him the question. It's like, well, how much is it going to cost you to start this thing? And it's like, oh, 300 or 500. And then when we dig into it, it's probably about 600,000. That's going to, well, you probably could buy a large business that's a mature business that's been around for like 5, 6, 10 years for like half that.
Right.
So why would you go spend all this money and all the risk and all the effort and all the stress of the first 3 years, instead of just going and buying something that's already profitable, already has culture, has people, has customers that are big fans. So to me, it's a no-brainer. Definitely, I think there's a lot of learning that comes from starting something. So if it's a passion of yours to start something from scratch, to tinker, to bring something to the world that didn't exist before, absolutely pursue it. I've done it. I wouldn't do it again.
Right. That's a one-time deal.
That's a one-time deal. Like I have lots of friends who are like post-exit. If you surveyed them, 99% of them will not start over.
Yeah.
They'll go acquire something or join something that's already started.
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting perspective. I mean, if 99% of those who have started a business successfully exited it are going to go and acquire another business, that's telling to what you should think about. And so you have resources available, through the Acquisition Collective that you're helping people with. Can you just share a little bit about your podcast and what you're doing there?
So we created a community where we teach people the process of acquiring a customer over 8 weeks, acquiring a business over 8 weeks. And then after the 8 weeks, they join our larger community where they see case studies, we break down deals, where they have deal flow. They have all the tools they need, templates, contracts, anything they need to do a successful acquisition. And then they get coaching on deals that they're working on. And then there's a community of people that are like-minded, that are, going toward the same direction, that are helping each other. They may be in different industries or they may be in the same industry, but the concepts are the same. We've been talking about business and, but these concepts apply to any industry. There might be some nuances, but, there's not that much difference. And so that, being around people that are going the same direction, having the tools, having the teaching, having the coaching makes it where, almost half our group buys a business within the classes. They haven't finished their classes. They go into contract. Yeah. So
within 8 weeks. Wow. That's incredible.
We had people go into contract in 3 weeks because they get, so motivated. I think also the cadence of accountability when you have you have homework to go call some broker or inquire about a number of businesses. And then next week you have to come and tell us what you did. That cadence of accountability makes it that people take action. And then whenever people take action, good things happen.
Absolutely. That's so great. I love that you've brought your systems thinking to the idea of acquiring business as well. So it makes it really, really powerful. And where can people find you or learn more about that?
Easy to find on all the socials, Jay Bourgana, or you can go on our website, acquisitioncollective.biz, B-I-Z at the end.
.biz. Okay. Excellent. And Jay Bourgana, I really appreciate you being here today. This was hugely valuable. And I know, just from the conversations that we've had many, many times, we could go on for hours. And I love talking to you. I love learning from you. You're a wealth of information, and I'm grateful that you spent some time with us.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you. I always learn. I always appreciate our conversations.
Yeah, man. Thanks, Jay. And thanks to everyone out there for listening to this. If you feel that somebody that can get value from this episode, please share it with a friend. Get the word out. We're trying to help family businesses everywhere to be their absolute best. We make up 60% of the United States GDP. Let's make it a valuable 60% and really lift each other up. Thanks for being here today. We'll see you next time.